Hello.
Okay, hi Ari Swift.
Hi.
Welcome.
Sorry,
Welcome. Okay. Gamlil, if
Sure.
you're around afterwards, we could talk at the end. It goes till about 10 o'clock at night here. Um,
I have a
so we're talking
I
about
have a
Iyov.
feeling. I
We're
just want to
actually
say
winding down.
it seems like
Can you hear me? Good. We're winding down Sefer Iyov, and we're talking about, one of the reasons why we're doing this right now is talking about how topical it is during the days of coronavirus, when people kind of thrust back into a more of an existential uh, mode of questioning. What are we doing in this world? What's going on in life? And um, right. It's a heavy time. And hi, Gabby. And just as we're talking about this, somebody alerted me, unconnected to Iyov, they thought I'd be interested in an op-ed in last Friday's New York Times, an editorial that was written. It's not bad, actually, and actually plays nicely into a lot of our topic. So I'll quote it to you. It's written by a professor, Mark Lilla, a professor of humanities at Columbia University, if Ivy League things impress you. The gist of of his article is that we're in a mode where we look to the pundits, we look to the experts for guidance. We look to the politicians expectantly, assuming they can get us out of this mess, and that his argument is that nobody knows anything, and we refuse to take no for an answer. And I'll quote from the article. He says like this. He says, "The history of humanity is the history of impatience. Not only do we want knowledge of the future, we want it when we want it. The book of Job condemns as prideful this desire for immediate attention." Of course, I was reading this, I did a double take. I thought, oh, I know the book of Job. So back to the quotation. The book of Job condemns as prideful this desire for immediate attention. Speaking out of the whirlwind, exactly where we find ourselves in the end of the book of Iyov today, speaking out of the whirlwind, God makes it clear that he is not a vending machine. He shows his face and reveals his plans when the time is ripe, not when the mood strikes us. He gives several illustrations of this. I'm quoting different sections of the article. I'm not going to give you the exhaustive piece, but he says more than one mayor has lost a re-election bid because he failed prophecies, victim of our collective overconfidence in his human foresight. The presidential candidate declares, "My plan will create 200,000 new jobs, raise the Dow 317 points, and lower the price of gasoline 15 cents. 2 years later, the gloating headline reads, "The President's Unkept Promises," and the like. And that's actually, even though we faulted at the very beginning, if you remember, I said how so many people really miss Iyov. I think at least in this one point, I think the author here of the article is onto something pretty accurate. That just like Iyov is speaking out of line and doesn't really is speaking out of his own depths, we find that all over the world today. People with a sense of entitlement and presumption that they're entitled to know and what's going to be, when indeed it's very hard to plan the next week. We're looking down the line trying to plan derech for next year, because Rosh Hashem Yisparach, right? But there's so many unknown variables, so we have to plan A, plan B, plan C. I imagine most of us are in a similar kind of a mode. It's where our tefillahs are particularly relevant. But if you're writing in the New York op-ed, you don't necessarily have tefillahs to turn to. So all you have are clever turns of phrases. Okay. Hashem is speaking to Iyov from the whirlwind. Look at, the pasuk. If you look back near the beginning of Iyov, it's chapter 9, pasuk 17. Gamliel, you'll forgive me. I'm doing a lot of this in English because the Hebrew, even for Hebrew speakers, is a little bit tricky. The pasuk says in Hebrew, in English, it says, this is one of Iyov's rants. He's going on prattling on about his problems in life, and he says, "For he," referring to Hashem, "has shattered me in a tempest, multiplied my wounds for no good reason." This is when Iyov was feeling particularly whiny, and Hashem, and he feels like a victim of Hashem's random whims, chas v'sholom, as if Hashem has whims. But pay attention to the Hebrew. It says Asher bisa'ara yishufenu v'hirbav sa'ai chinam. Notice the term sa'ara. So immediately, this is early on, Iyov has no idea where he's heading. And
Sa'ara as a storm or Sa'ara as a hair?
Excellent, good question, both. But the simple meaning is the storm. The simple meaning is definitely just a storm. So Aviel, welcome. I see you just came on, and Eden, welcome too. Yeah, so he comes from, so like Iyov in his whining says, Hashem gets me in his storm, in his tempest. And then Hashem will certainly respond in a tempest. And indeed, that's what the Gemara connects the two episodes. And as it were, the Gemara declares that Hashem angered Hashem. Hashem doesn't get angry. Hashem's not subject to human emotions. But when the Torah and when Chazal refer to Hashem with emotions, it's conveying an idea that we can grasp. So Hashem, as it were, is angered with the word Sa'ara. Oh yeah, Iyov, you're going to start up with me with a Sa'ara. And so he answers Iyov in a Sa'ara. Right? He comes to him in this whirlwind. And quite literally, I mean, we have this expression, but it's actually, as far as our slang and our colloquialisms go, this one's a pretty good one. He quite literally blows Iyov away in the storm. In this pasuk, there's an implied kfira. There's a certain heresy. What was it? What's Iyov saying? The implied heresy is, Hashem, you mixed me up. Again, remember, keep the content of the verse very much in your mind. For he has shattered me in a tempest, multiplied my wounds, and then again, chinam, for no good reason. Hashem, maybe you mixed me up in a storm. Maybe you mixed my name, Iyov, for Oyev. You thought I'm an enemy, but I'm a friend. I'm a good guy. We know about you and your friends, Iyov, right? So, and he's implying here, not subtly, that Hashem makes mistakes and gets confused. So it's within this context that that we have a new insight into, if you remember last week, we talked about this. Hashem is responding, confounding Iyov with the wonders of creation. No, Iyov, he's answering in definitive terms. I'm not confused. I'm not mistaken. You have no idea how I operate. And indeed, that's how we find him. Vayan Hashem es Iyov mina sa'ara. Hashem answers Iyov from the storm.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Rabbi, but where are we?
Please do. What's that?
Where are we? Like in the text?
So I quoted a verse, chapter 9, pasuk 17, that turns out, based on the Gemara, is the real connection in the whole Sefer. Iyov, in saying that Hashem attacks him in a whirlwind, is criticizing Hashem's mistakes, his confusion. Hashem indeed responds to him in a whirlwind and blows him away, and Iyov is standing there gulping humbly. The Gemara goes on and says, Hashem, you want to speak to me in a sa'ara? So Hashem homiletically, metaphorically in other words, responds to him about a sa'ara, about a hair. He says, according to the Gemara, Iyov, I created many hairs on a person, and for each hair, I created its own pore. If two hairs would grow from one hole, it would dim one's eyesight. I don't confuse one pore from the next. Would I confuse Iyov with Oyev, your name with the word enemy? Meaning, what the Gemara is saying on the simple level is that there is such a fine-tuned precision in all the details of creation. If one of them, what did I just quote? Hopefully something that's familiar.
Asher Tsar.
Asher Yatzar, right? Think about the contents of what we say every time we go relieve ourselves, right? If one of these, do you know that if we would, the Gemara says this so powerfully at the end of Brachos, some of our cavities in our bodies contain liquid. Other ones, other sections are big vacuums of air. If the one that contains liquid would have air in it, or conversely, if those that would contain air would be filled with liquid, we would die on the spot. Everything is calibrated so precisely. Everything is lined up exactly right. There's no confusion in this world and the way Hashem manages everything. So no, Iyov, if you think I've gotten things mistaken, you think I've taken you for an innocent man, an unworthy, whatever your claims are, no, you couldn't be more wrong. He answers similarly. There's several more pieces in the Gedata. I'm not going into each one of them, but if you open up to the middle of the whirlwind, it's chapter 38, verse 25. It was one of the last verses that we considered last week. I'll read it again in English. Who opened a canal for the rushing waters, or made a path for the clouds which carry the crashing of the thunder? The verse asks. So comes the Gemara in Baba Basra. He says to Iyov, for every thunderclap, I created its own distinct path, so that two of them shouldn't go forth from the same path. If there were two such strikes, two such thunderclaps, it would destroy the world. Rashi explains how that works. The sound would overwhelm us. One strike of thunder is confounding and terrifying, but two would destroy it. I don't confuse a thunderclap. Would I confuse Iyov with Oyev? Again, this becomes a refrain. This becomes almost the rhetorical question as a chorus. What does thunder do?
Nothing. It's just sound.
Yeah. And what's its effect on us?
It's terrifying.
Yeah. It's mortifying. And picture yourself in bed in the middle of the night. Big old shocking thunder clap. Right? You're shaking. Yeah, you fall on the floor sometimes. Right? It underscores, and Dovi, you're right. It's nothing. It's just, it's a lot of noise. But we're shaken to the core because we're vulnerable. We're in this world, and we exist on a hair's breadth, quite literally. That's an expression, by the way, and it's totally apt to Iyov. We're hanging on a hair. That's the experience, right? And it's nothing, maybe you know what the Davidka is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know the story of the Davidka?
Yeah, there was
It's
a battle
the
there.
big gun that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You can
It's
still
almost
see it.
this. You hear my line of thinking, exactly. It's a big sound that did nothing, except it had a really rousing effect in the War of Independence when the Jews had almost no munitions because they weren't permitted by the British to import them or to make them. So some guy named David went and developed this big old booming sound, and the Arabs, when they responded as was desired, they screamed Allah Akbar and ran for the hills. Right? So all of this is, we're so weak, we're so fragile. Which we are. So Hashem comes to Iyov, and he ultimately delivers his three speeches. We went into one of them in great depth last week. The Ramban breaks down the meaning of the three speeches. Here's his summary. The first speech is, as we've said, through a sa'ara, through a whirlwind. Iyov actually, it's at this moment that Iyov attains a nevuah, and his capacity. It's not just that he has a divine inspiration or that Hashem is speaking to him in a dream, but quite literally he's prophesizing. The second encounter, the second speech that we get from Hashem is almost the opposite. It's faint and subtle. It's like Eliyahu's famous encounter with Hashem. Anybody remember the expression?
in the mountain of Carmel.
In the mountain, not Carmel, but the mountain of Har Sinai, what's called Horev. He experiences Hashem. If you don't know these words, these are for the ages. It's a great expression, and it's a great image from the Sefer Malachim. It says he experiences Hashem. You got the right idea, but you're really close. You're almost going to say it. First, there's an earthquake, and then there's fire, and then there's a great wind, and finally, there's a kol dmama daka, a still small voice, and that's really how he encounters Hashem. Right, with all the flamboyance, with all the big spectacle and the fireworks, sometimes we also encounter Hashem in the quiet,
no, but that's not
subtle
corn.
moment.
That's crack corn.
Ari,
That's
maybe turn your audio off. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought it was already.
No problem. No problem. So the second speech Ramban characterizes as kol dmama daka, and in the second speech, Iyov seems to react well. And he's quiet, and suddenly we're finding him receptive. It's almost like Iyov, we've tracked his progress. He goes from being somebody who's of pristine integrity and faith to somebody who's wallowing in his misery. Elihu finally knocks some sense to him and humbles him and makes him receptive. And now Hashem opens him up and makes him utterly receptive. The third and final speech Hashem gives him goes back to the Sahara, goes back to a whirlwind, and shows Iyov admitting that he's at fault. And he essentially he does what's called siduk hadin. Siduk hadin is a concept where a person comes with full heart and full intention, full kavana, to acknowledge that Hashem is the master and I know nothing. When do we say that? When is in halacha? In halacha terms, when do we do that?
When someone dies.
When someone dies, right? So, Baruch Dayana Emes. I don't get anything. I'm completely clueless. Doesn't add up in my mind. Baruch Dayana Emes. Hashem knows best. I don't know anything. Right? That's Siduk Hadin. And Iyov comes around to that too. He says, fine. We're going to consider all this in greater depth. What I'm doing now is I'm tying up the narrative of the book, and then it takes a little bit of time to unpack some of the really fantastic meaning. And there's a lot, and it's very relevant. I hope those of you who've been so far with us stick with it for the next couple of days, because we have some important things to say. Here's one example of Iyov's reaction that reflects well on him. Turn to chapter 40, mamash near the end of the Sefer, and we'll read the first 4 psukim. I'm reading it again in English. You could read it in Hebrew if you prefer. Then Hashem challenged Iyov, saying, does fighting with Hashem, Shakai is the name he uses, confer privilege? One who presumes to wrangle with God has the obligation to respond. Verse 3, Iyov responded to Hashem, saying, I have to do this in Hebrew. You'll forgive me. I have to do this in Hebrew, and then we'll do the English. Vayan Iyov es Hashem vayomar, Hein, kalti, ma'ashiveka, yadi samti, lemofi. Yes, I'm of little worth. What can I answer? I put my hand to my mouth. What an image. Iyov. Psh. Any associations? There's another tzaddik in history who doesn't go through the contortions that Iyov has to go through in this whole sefer. He experiences personal loss and tragedy and immediately has this reaction. Saw just a few weeks ago in Parsha.
Aaron after Nadav and Avihu died?
Aaron after Nadav and Avihu died. Do you remember the name of the lashon of the pasuk?
No.
Vayidom Aharon.
Hmm.
Aaron's quiet. Iyov, I'm commenting now, this is my own take. I had never seen this before. Aaron takes it much more elegantly. 2 words, Vayidom Aaron. Iyov seems the same, and I'm sure all the credit to Iyov for his reaction, but I perceive maybe a slight criticism in the pasuk. I put my hand to my mouth is much less elegant than simply putting his hand to his mouth. Meaning, by saying I put my hand to my mouth, it's almost like I'm pointing to it. See? What a guy, what a guy. Iyov, and this is consistent with what we've seen in him, Iyov is nothing if not self-conscious. Hey, maybe my kids have sinned. Maybe I'll bring a bunch of korbanos. That'll cover it. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm putting my hand on my mouth. So the gesture is totally great, and it's apt, and it's appropriate, and it's responding as he should. So maybe I'm being overly harsh here. This is something that I'm picking up in Iyov. There's something about Iyov that does feel a little bit off. Not quite the level, certainly, of the other tzaddikim. I put my hand to my mouth, Iyov says. Ramban says, Ramban reads this totally positively. He says, this is a total change of heart on Iyov's part. And when Hashem now, there's a back and forth, Hashem responds, Hashem is now just reinforcing the direction that Iyov has moved in. Iyov, you've done well, is basically what he says. That's the Ramban's take. The Mitzudos, I've mentioned the Mitzudos is often understood as the simplest of he gives the simplest reading of the text. He disagrees with the Ramban. He says, no, Iyov has no sense of contrition. He hasn't gone back at anything he said. He's just simply accepting. And that's why Hashem presses further, meaning the fact that Hashem continues to speak shows that Hashem, according to Mitzudos, is not satisfied with Iyov's response. Let's continue. You can take out your Sefer Iyov. If you don't have it, look at Sefaria online. Pasuk 5. Iyov goes on, I have said little, but I shall declare no more. Only two things, but I will not continue. So Hashem responded to Iyov from out of the whirlwind. This is the last of Hashem's addresses, saying, come, gird your loins like a warrior. Come on, be a man, Iyov. I'm sorry, I'm adding my own 2 cents in some of this. I will put questions to you and you will enlighten me. And now Hashem goes back to the original harangue. Would you go so far as to undermine my judgment, put me in wrong, and that you might be right? Do you have strength comparable to that of Hashem? Can you, like Hashem, again, here's the verse, produce a thunderclap? I'm skipping. Hashem goes on like this until the end of the chapter. He says in verse 30, can friends make a feast of the Leviathan? He's referring to the Leviathan. Can they divide it up among merchants? Can you riddle its skin with barbs, capture its head in a fish trap? Were you but to place your hand upon it, you need anticipate no more battles. Finally, Hashem, if you turn, we skip a chapter and go near the end, chapter 42, verse 7. After Hashem had spoken these words to Iyov, Hashem said to Eliphaz, remember Eliphaz, the first of the friends, the Temanist, he said, my anger is seething against you. By the way, try to lead a good life. You don't want Hashem to say those words to you. Just in general, you can quote me. My anger is seething against you and against your 2 friends, because in your defense of me, you did not speak as appropriately as had my servant Iyov. And if it was subtle before, now it's not subtle at all. It's all about how we treat each other in this world. I don't care if you're right. I don't care if the content of your words has merit. Be a mensch. Speak to your friend in his time of need. And he tells them to bring korbanos. And then if you in the middle of verse 8, he says, then my servant Iyov will pray for you, and I will look upon him with goodwill in order that I not be forced to deal with you improperly. Meaning, you guys really made a terrible mistake. You didn't treat him well, and now your fate is in his hands. If he says good, then you're okay. This because in your defense of me, you did not speak as appropriately as had my servant Iyov. They all leave. And then Hashem looks with goodwill upon Iyov's tefillah. Then, in verse 10, when Iyov prayed for his friend, Hashem restored him to him that which he had taken from him. Pay attention, we're just finishing the Sefer here. We're not done, though, with our discussion. Moreover, Hashem increased all that Iyov had so that it was doubled. Then all his brothers, his sisters, and his former acquaintances came to him to eat a meal with him in his house. They recalled his mourning and comforted him for all the dreadful things that Hashem had brought upon him. Each of them gave him a coin and a golden ring. Now, Hashem blessed Iyov's later time more than his beginnings. He had 14,000 small stock, 6,000 camels, and 1,000 span of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. Remember this at the very beginning. People in these days measured their wealth in livestock. So Iyov is loaded now. He's a quadrillionaire. Further, verse 13, he had twice 7 of sons and 3 daughters. We'll comment on this in a moment. It's not quite double everything that Iyov had in the past. We'll try to explain why. He gave the one the name Yemima, the second the name Kitsia, and the third the name Keren Hapuch. Verse 15, throughout the land, no women could be found as beautiful as Iyov's daughters. Their father granted them an inheritance among their brothers. After this, Iyov lived 140 years. He saw his children and his children's children, 4 generations. Then Iyov died old and satiated with days. And there the book ends, and that's, in a sense, just where we're beginning. We're just getting started here. Everybody's with me so far? Okay. So the book has rounded out. They all live happily ever after. No harm done. Okay. The Gemara Baba Basra says that he lives 140 years. He was, if you remember, 70 when all the afflictions started. And now he lives another 140 years. What is this meant to conjure up? What number is that equivalent to, famously?
210, which is
210?
That's how long we were in Egypt the
You got it.
first time.
210 years, and the Gemara makes that connection, right? So there's like a Shibud Mitzrayim, right? And seemingly in Iyov's case, at least for a certain portion of it, every bit is painful. Iyov, as we said, saw 4 generations. He died old, satiated. Now, here's a kasha. He seemingly lost his first children. So, the implication at the end of the book is, oh, it's okay. We'll just give you new ones. That'll make up for it. You'll get double the number. Well, I don't know if you're thinking about this, but children are not a mathematical equation. You lose a child, and that's never replaceable, right? So it's nice he has new ones, but how could he ever get over the old ones? You hear the kasha? Yeah, so it's not a kasha if you accept the Rambam. We mentioned this Rambam, but that was a while ago, and we've been talking like Iyov's friends. So I'll remind you. The Rambam holds that the first children, in fact, never died. They were taken captive. And now they're coming back. And then more were born as well. So Iyov was under the impression that they had died, or alternately a captive is like a dead person. And now that they're restored, good. So that at least solves the problem for the Rambam. In other instances, it's not so clear to lose and to never regain, whether Iyov really gains back anything, or whether there's a certain emptiness, a certain vacuum that's not replaceable. Another problem. Why was the number? The Gemara asked this question, Baba Basra. Why was the number of sons doubled? There were 7 sons earlier. Now they're 14. The daughters just remained 3. Anybody want to give a guess? What is it?
Yeah, the only thing I could think of 7 and 2 is Noah. The pairs of 7, or maybe I'm confused. Maybe it was 7 of each animal, something like that.
True. What do you do with the 3 daughters?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it connects entirely. So in this case, in this case, the Gemara answers simply, says that it's true that the number of daughters was not doubled, it remained 3, but it does say that those 3 were of great beauty. And their beauty was in fact doubled. Rashi says there's no doubling that could be better than this. How are they beautiful? So the names reflect the beauty. The Gemara does some wordplay with the names. Yemima, she was like the day. Her complexion was clear as day. Kitsia was a fragrance that's like cassia, which is indeed one of the 11 fragrant herbs in the Ketairos. And the third, Karen Hapuch. Hapuch is a special cosmetic. They're all beauty, and they're all very physical, this worldly beauty. I'm pointing something out here that's a little ominous. Iyov's rewards are very much of and in this world. A lot of wealth, double the days, a lot of kids, not just daughters, but beautiful beautiful in very earthy ways, like fragrant herbs or like a special cosmetic. These are rewards, true, but they're fleeting rewards. They barely even last in this world. I mean, I don't know, unless you have cosmetic, if you have some kind of surgical cosmetics, they tend to fade away after, halfway through Shabbos Kodesh. The mascara's running already, right? So they certainly don't stay with the person into the next world. We'll see. There's a certain opinion coming up below about what happens with Iyov that seems to be strongly indicated here, that the reward may very much be in the here and now. Go ahead. Somebody started to say something, no?
I said if the mascara's running, you better go catch it.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. How does Iyov really end? There's a machlokus. According to one Gemara, also in another place in Baba Basra, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Iyov a taste of Olam Haba when conception and birth will be simultaneously. It will happen at the same time. The question is, can such an end be so positive after all the trauma that Iyov has endured? Really, does trauma justify all of this? Well, it depends. I mean, we said that a lot of people who suffer in this life go through great ordeals and hardship, and actually they come out on top. They're stronger, not despite the hardship, but because of it. Meaning it tested them. It tested the mettle of their character, and it actually made them stronger. We talked about that, if you recall, when we talked about the concept of nisayon. If a person responds well and makes tshuva and does something of himself, does meaningful, worthy things with his time, then that's a good thing. But then consider this brisa. The brisa says, there was a non-Jewish, calls him a chassid, righteous man, named Iyov, who only lived in this world to receive reward. When Hashem brought him, pay attention to this. This is a big source. Anybody spaced out? Want me to go back? Get this source. It's brisa. There was a non-Jewish chassid, a tzaddik by the name of Iyov, who only lived in this world to receive reward. When Hashem brought him afflictions, he blasphemed. And Hashem doubled his reward in this world in order to drive him from the next world. So actually, the end of Iyov that we just read, which really has all the makings of a fairy tale, and they all lived happily ever after, and that was the punishment, because after that, Iyov, no more. That's what famously Chazal say. Why does it appear for the part of the question of Rasha B'Tovlo? Why does it appear, at least to our reading of things, a lot of the time that the bad guys seem to be basking in glory and happiness, and certainly material plenty in this world? And you know this? Because I'll say this quite famously.
So they all get all the reward here, and they don't get it from above.
Yeah, right. Fill them with the good stuff in this world, because that's it, buddy. No more after this. Right, you used up your merits. And we know...
המיתהו לרשע וימות.
Oh, thanks, Gamliel. Thanks for the Hebrew. Right, mamash. That they, right, and that the idea is that in this world, whatever, I don't know, imagine the most sublime Mozart concerto or the most delicious sourdough bread you ever ate, and then you, oh, thanks for that, Gamliel. Master Chef. So you imagine the best experience in this world. It's worth maybe 1,000th of a thousandth of whatever Olam Haba is going to be like. I remember once, they have learning Bein Hazmanim, when the vacation times when you don't formally have to be learning, and they have all these incentives sometimes that you could come for money and make money, and it's a good way to the boys. I mean, the yeshiva boys particularly don't have too many options to make extra money, so why not? You're learning anyway, why not make some money? So I remember once going to another shul in Telstone that they didn't pay. And one of the Bachrim was learning there. And I said, oh, man, I mean, you go over there, you could do this and make some money. He said, yeah, but then I wouldn't get the fuller schar. I want to get only spiritual schar. I don't want it in this world.
Was it in Nachlat Tzvi up the hill?
It wasn't. I saw him in Bnei Yeshivas. Yeah, could have been. But yeah, I mean, that's a certain sensitivity. So it's a certain sensibility that a person has. So why use up your zchuyos in Olam Hazeh when it'll be much sweeter in Olam Haba, right? So according to this opinion, Iyov gets it all good. They live happily ever after, and then they die, and that's it. Now, I have to comment on this point, and again, I want to underline this. This idea seems to be supported by the very earthy, material kinds of descriptions, especially reading the daughters' names, all very fleeting, transient kinds of objects. Art Scroll makes a comment, though, on this brisa. It says that this brisa seems to be a das yachid, a singular opinion, because elsewhere we see that Iyov is not held to task for his blasphemy. I mean, he says things he should not say. But remember this idea, we've said it many times, Adam lo nitpas, person's not held accountable for the wrong things he says in times of despair.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the dominant view, that Iyov is actually given some slack. And okay, Iyov, yeah, we'll just overlook that. It seems that Hashem responds positively to him, unlike his friends in the end. It's certainly true that we should struggle in this world. We have to be careful how we speak to Hashem. We don't want to, I mean, the book ends as ambiguously as it begins, right? Iyov, we never know who he is. Is he Jewish, not Jewish? Where did he live? When did he live? All questions. Did he live happily ever after? Or did he die unhappily ever after? All open questions, right? What's his long-term fate? All of which is stimulating. And we can now grope for some tentative conclusions. Tomorrow night, we'll hopefully tie these up. But let me start, unless somebody has something that they want to say. I've been talking a lot tonight. Usually there's more back and forth.
Yeah, I have one thing to say.
Yeah.
I've actually like a couple of things to say, but would you say that the wording of the last pasuk, that it says he was satiated, would you say like the physicality of that word kind of supports the brisa
Nice.
opinion?
Yeah. I think that's an excellent reading. Right. He was, let's make sure that that's sustainable actually in Hebrew too, because in English, the English nuance is not always the same as the Hebrew. The Lashon HaKodesh is Vayamos Iyov Zokin Sva Yamim. Sva Yamim, satiated in days. Saveh is the same word that we say in modern Hebrew when you're satisfied, when you've eaten to your heart's content. Very much a physical kind of a satiety, a very satisfaction. So yeah, you could say that. Seems to support that reading. But there are other indications in Iyov that support the other readings. So we're left still with ambiguity, which I claim is part of the. It's intentional. The fact that Iyov is a mystery from the beginning to the end, I think that's intended. Now, Begadol. Look, you had something else, Ed, and I didn't want to cut you off. You had something else you want to say?
Yeah, I have a question for like about the friends. Well, it's kind of like a big question, so you could answer it now. You could answer it after your next point. But my question is, it's like something I thought of throughout the book is that would it have been better if the friends didn't try at all? Like because they seem to be criticized for their attempts, but like but but they still put their like their attempt out there, you know? Like
Yeah.
so would it like for them to be criticized throughout the whole book but not recognized for the actual attempt to go try to soothe Iyov, which is a very difficult attempt, don't you think that should be recognized? And like is it recognized? I don't know, like that's my
I
view.
think, well, actually, I take back something I said a couple minutes ago, which is that I think if there's one definitive statement in the book, it's about the friends. And I think the answer to your question is they should have stayed home. Remember, they start as the prototype of friends. O chavrusa o misusa was a phrase that you see throughout Shas. It's referring to them. They had the common tree, or some say it was a crown, that when one of them was in suffering, they all knew immediately and they came running, right? And I mean, we don't see any friendship on display here. We see antagonism from the beginning, and then it gets worse. And so if that's how you want to display friendship, go home. Yeah.
Really interesting.
Right. I wanted to say, I mean, I'll say it right now. One of my tentative conclusions is exactly this. We see, again, the prototype of ideal friends, so to speak. And we wind up learning that actually friendship can be, it's not always this way, chas v'shalom, but it can be the most unreliable, ephemeral relationship. You can't always count on it with all, due respect to all the songs, the Beatles, you got to, get by with a little help from my friends and all the other pop eulogies of friendship. Well, hello, I got a little friend here. Look who just crawled in. So, with all these qualities of friendship, they turn on each other in friendship. And in the end, all we have is the Gemara in Sota. The Gemara says, what do we have to rely on? Only on our Father in heaven, not on friends. So much for friendship.
I mean, those are probably not real friends to begin with. You can't call them friends.
I know, but they're presented to us as the prototype of friends.
Yeah. I mean, for like the general concept that you just said, for like as in friends are supposed, as in not all friends are always actually friends. I wouldn't call them friends, but yeah, no.
I know that's true, and maybe you're right. I'm arguing with you though because there's no indication that they were, fair weather friends or mediocre or not really there. Quite the contrary. Chazal say they're the best of best friends, and yet they totally let him down in the end. And they're rebuked harshly by Hashem himself.
You're right. Okay.
So we'll reserve our long-term conclusions for tomorrow, B'ezras Hashem. Any other questions in the meantime? Good. I will see you all tomorrow. Gamliel, if you want to stay behind, great. And I'll see everybody else tomorrow, B'ezras Hashem. Good to see you.
Can we ask random questions?
Would it be okay if you push them, unless there's something urgent, it would be better because I want to speak to Gamliel and then we're having a staff meeting now. So if there's anything urgent, by all means, and otherwise maybe we can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Okay, good to see you.
See you, Rabbi.
Bye. Gamliel, I've been recording this. Let me try to figure out how to unrecord it. Can you stay on and I'm going to end the session and come back to it? Gamliel? Okay.